Welcome to Love and Abuse, the show about navigating the difficult relationship. From simple disagreements to emotionally abusive behaviors, you deserve respect and kindness. All the information on this show is meant for educational purposes only. Always seek a professional for your mental health and well-being, and always pick your battles wisely. I'm your host, Paul Coliani. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Love and Abuse. If this is your first time listening, I'm sorry that you have to tune into this show, but I'm glad you found it because I'm here to help. I'm here to give you the best information I can to help you through whatever you're going through in your relationship. Sometimes it's just difficulties. Sometimes it's emotionally abusive behavior. Sometimes it's worse than that. But what we talk about here is the type of behaviors where someone feels selfish or entitled to do them, regardless of how you feel about it. So they might do something or say something that makes you feel bad or guilty or responsible for the problems in the relationship, and they feel like they're right. So they continue being that way and making you feel like somebody that they don't care about. At least it feels that way. And what's interesting is the emotionally abusive people that I converse with almost on a daily basis, because I have a program for them, is that they say they really do love the people they're hurting. They don't use those words. Some of them do, actually, because some of them have had realizations. Some of them have popped out of their trance, is the way I like to look at it sometimes, because they grew up thinking that this is how you're supposed to be in a relationship. Not everyone. I mean, I'm not talking about everyone that is abusive or emotionally abusive or difficult in general. I'm talking about those who have learned how to cope with challenges in an unhealthy way. So they may have learned that in childhood. Well, most of them have. And when they grew up, they brought their unhealthy coping mechanisms, which usually stemmed from old survival mechanisms, because when they were children, they were either neglected or they witnessed some bad behaviors from their parents or caregivers. And what ends up happening is, as a child, they don't know how to deal with the challenges because they weren't taught how to, or even if they were, it can be overwhelming for a child. And so they find ways to, quote, survive. I put that in quotes because it's not usually a survival situation. It's more like, I don't know how to handle this, so what do I do instead? For example, when I was a child, I learned how to be quiet. I learned how to shut my mouth because I did not want to anger my stepfather, because if I did, then in an alcoholic rage, he might hurt me. That was my belief. It never happened, and maybe that was because I stayed quiet. I don't know, but he never physically hurt me. He held me down when I was 4, and that's another issue for another day, but there was some trauma behind that. But after that, he never did anything to me. He did hurt other members of my family, including my mom. So I learned a lot of behaviors that I knew I never wanted to do in my relationships, and I also knew that I didn't want to happen to me. And so back then, being silent was or at least my belief, it was a good idea, because if I opened my mouth, it might upset him. It might incite his bad behavior toward me. And as a child, I thought that was a death wish. If I did anything or said anything that would provoke his bad behavior. Didn't want that. So I learned different ways to handle that, basically coping with those challenges from a child's point of view, because I didn't have any resources and I felt like I was alone and I had to figure it out for myself. So staying silent was one of those. And that silence that I developed when I was a child turned into an emotionally abusive behavior when I was older, into the silent treatment, the kind that where you withdraw love and connection and affection to make the other person feel bad and guilty. I'm not proud of it, but this is what I did. And when I did that, the other person had no idea, my partner had no idea where I was inside. And it was I used it as a manipulation tactic and I wasn't fully conscious of it back then, but I felt like, why isn't she doing what I want her to do? So I shut up, I stayed silent, and I withdrew love and connection. And by doing that, my hope was that she would feel bad or guilty enough to finally do what I wanted her to do. I talk about this very nonchalantly, and I'm definitely not proud of my behavior. But I've talked about it on the show before. I developed emotionally abusive behaviors, and I lost my relationships over the years. And so the behaviors that I did, I now know what they are. I now know what causes problems in relationships because I've had them all and I've done them all, and I had to heal from them in order to have a stable, happy, long-lasting, healthy relationship that I have now. And I feel so much better inside of me having healed that, because being that way was harmful to everyone, including myself, because I was creating my own disappointment. I was self-sabotaging. I was self-sabotaging because I was doing behaviors that I believed would get me more love and connection, because if they did what I want, we'd both be happy. That was my false belief system back then. But I did that because I wanted stronger connection. I wanted to be happy with my partner. But what ends up happening when you do emotionally abusive behavior is that you push people away. And that's what I had to learn, is that I kept pushing people away. And back then I was upset with them for not doing what I wanted them to do, which is controlling and manipulative and oppressive. And when somebody does that to you, when you feel controlled and manipulated and oppressed, you are going to slowly lose your passion and zest for life. You're going to question yourself, your sanity, because there's a lot of gaslighting in there, typically. And when you are in an emotionally abusive relationship for a long enough period of time, you are going to lose a sense of who you are, your self-identity, meaning how you identify in the world. Basically, somebody is saying that I can't accept you as you are, so you need to be who I want you to be. And if you're in a relationship with somebody who can't accept you as you are and tries to change you into who they want you to be, you will definitely be unhappy. You will feel drained. You will feel confused, and you will eventually fall out of love. If it's a romantic relationship, you will get to the point where you feel dead inside. And I often hear the victims of emotionally abusive behavior say, I feel like a shell of my former self. My wife said that about her last relationship, her marriage. She got to the point, she was married to pretty much a sociopath. She got to the point where she didn't know herself anymore. She lost herself. She disintegrated from the inside out, emotionally speaking, and some physical as well. It takes a physical toll on you. So my point with all this is that the emotionally abusive person can snap out of their trance because they finally maybe try on empathy for the first time. They actually put the other person's shoes on, metaphorically, and say, oh, this is what it feels like to be talked down to like that, or to feel disconnected from the person, like the other person is in the silent treatment and is withdrawing love and connection and affection. And you just don't know where they are, and it feels hurtful because you want to connect and you can't, and there's nothing you can do. And I tried this on at the end of my previous marriage. I tried on what it was like to be her. And that's when I snapped out of my trance. It was a trance-like state that I had held on to for at least 30 years of my life. I went through several relationships, and they all left me. And I finally, at the end of my marriage, where I believed that marriage is supposed to be for the rest of your life, I believed that it was supposed to last, and here it was ending. And I thought, what the hell is going on? How come I keep losing relationships? I finally started questioning myself. I finally started taking responsibility for people leaving me, because I couldn't look past the clear fact that I was the common denominator in all my relationship failures. That was a good relationship. That was a good relationship. That was a good relationship. And they left. Why did they leave? So I figured that out at the end of my marriage. I finally tried on being the person that I was in a relationship with and asked myself, how would I feel if they tried to control what I ate or drank and disconnected from me and withdrew love? And I just put out all the things I was doing and judgmental and critical. How would I feel if she were judgmental and critical toward me all the time? And I finally started getting it. Just the wheels were turning in my brain. And I suddenly felt sick. I suddenly felt like vomiting. I just didn't realize how awful I had been. And that's no excuse. I take full responsibility for who I was. And I sit here today owning who I used to be and then feeling really proud of who I've become. And also, I feel really good that I can help others stop being emotionally abusive so that you and other people listening to this show won't experience the torture and the suffering that you go through or have gone through, or many people that are listening now are either going through or have gone through. And if I can help in that way, I can pay it forward a little bit and hopefully change someone out there from doing this kind of behavior, this selfish, entitled, very not, discompassionate behavior, very uncaring, unempathetic kind of behavior where they don't consider the emotional state and the well-being and the mental state of the person they are supposed to be supporting and loving and accepting and respecting and standing up for and being there for. This whole gamut of things you're supposed to do for the people that you care about. When that's not being done, the relationship cannot survive. I know this firsthand. It cannot survive. And so when the light bulb finally went off for me, or went on for me, I realized, oh, I'm doing such terrible things. I would not want to feel this way. And that sounds silly. Like, how wouldn't you know? How wouldn't you know you're not doing it? Because I didn't. I didn't realize it was abusive. I thought it was normal. I thought this is how you're supposed to be in a relationship because I had no real good reference. Actually, I did have some reference, or a good reference, which was my partners throughout my life who were treating me with kindness and love and accepting me as I am. But I never got it. It never broke through my skull that that's how I was supposed to be. So again, no excuse. I take full responsibility for who I was and how I showed up in the world. I have apologized to the people that I've hurt. I have gotten in touch with one of my first long-term girlfriends, or she got in touch with me, and she read my article called My Healing Journey from Being an Emotional Abuser. And she wrote me an email and said, wow, who the hell are you? She didn't use those words, but she was just surprised. And I had mentioned a couple of things that I did in our relationship when we were together, and she was just blown away that I had changed, or I had changed so much. So she wrote and said, wow, this is amazing, and I'm thrilled to read this, and I'm so grateful that you wrote it. And talk about sitting there humbly reading this email. I mean, I tear up thinking about it right now, how different I was back then, who that guy was that was with her back then, a different person. I was in a different state of mind, and I believed different things. I did not have her best interest in mind. I did not treat her the way she deserved to be treated. And I had to grow up. I had to mature. I had to realize that the world wasn't mine to control, especially the people in my life. I was not there to control them. I was not there to turn them into who I wanted them to be. I'm supposed to be, and I think we are all supposed to be there for someone else. When we have anyone that we love in our life, we have to be there as accepting and loving and caring and compassionate and empathetic to show them that it's okay for you to be yourself. It's okay for you to make decisions that feel right to you. And my job as a partner, someone who cares about you, I'm supposed to say, if that's what makes you happy, that's what I want. That's what my job is. I want to look at my wife and say, whatever you want to do with your life, I support that. And I found out that that's what makes a happy relationship, is supporting someone else's path to happiness, supporting the decisions they want to make for themselves, the path that they want to follow. And the more you support someone's path, the more you support the decisions they want to make for themselves, the happier they feel inside and the more loved and connected they feel to the person who allows them to be themselves, who allows them to do that. And allows the wrong word, but you know what I mean. The person who lets them be themselves without resistance. That doesn't mean you'll never argue or have disagreements. It just means overall the relationship works because you see the other person as an individual with their own needs and wants and desires and passions and their hobbies and their interests and everything else that makes them who they are. And our job isn't to change another person, it's to allow them to explore themselves to the fullest, in my opinion. Now, of course, this has to work both ways. You could do that for some, you may be doing that for somebody else right now, but they have to do the same for you. And if they're not doing the same for you, then it doesn't work. You can be loving and accepting and caring and kind and compassionate, all those things. And if they're not doing the same for you, then it's not balanced. It's an unbalanced relationship. And I've said this in another episode, but the relationship sinks. That's what will happen. When you have an unbalanced relationship, the relationship starts to list because the water is filling in on, I don't know, the ship terms, port, bow. It's filling in somewhere and it's pulling the ship down. And then one person will be on the high side and the other person will be where the water is starting to fill around their feet. And it's going to feel like that. It's going to feel like drowning, an emotional drowning. I try to come on the air and teach you about this stuff, hoping that maybe you'll have enough tools and resources to take care of yourself, especially around people who don't have your best interests in mind. And I'm hoping also that the people that do the hurtful behavior, the emotionally abusive people out there, also tune in and hear this and maybe think twice, maybe just reflect for a moment and ask themselves, well, how would it feel if the person I cared about did those things to me or said those things to me? How would that affect me? And then maybe they'll snap out of their trance and realize, oh crap, I've been doing this all this time. I've been doing this to my partner, my friend, my brother, all this time. I shouldn't be doing that. I shouldn't be acting that way. I told you I felt sick. I felt like vomiting as soon as I realized just how awful I'd been, just how critical and judgmental I'd been to my ex-wife. And before we got our divorce, because it was really too late for her, she had fallen out of love and she had sealed her heart. And you know what? Good for her. She needed to. She needed to get away from the danger that I was. I make it sound dramatic, but there's emotional danger in this kind of relationship. You are in a dangerous relationship for your mental health and well-being and your emotional state. And that's where she was. And she finally had to seal her heart shut to protect herself. That makes sense. Sometimes that happens. And that's what she did. Of course, I didn't want it back then because I was learning all this stuff about myself. And I was thinking, what are you talking about? I'm not like that anymore. But it was too late. And of course, I can't just say, hey, I'm not like that anymore. What's the problem? I tried, but I was still learning. I was still learning how to be a real person, a real partner, someone who did care selflessly as I could get. And that was something that I still needed to work on. But she did see the changes. She said, I like the changes, but I'm just not in love with you anymore. And it hurt like hell, but that's exactly what needed to happen. In fact, her deciding to separate and eventually divorce was what really kicked my healing into gear. And I've seen this over and over again. The emotionally abusive person sometimes needs such a dramatic shift in the relationship that the other person says, you know what, I've had enough, I'm done. And if you continue doing this, I won't stick around. And that's when I see the most change, is when the emotionally abusive person, their partner or whoever, says, I've had enough, I'm done, it's over. And it finally hits them in a way where they realize, wow, this is serious. I'm going to lose the person I care about. And again, it sounds like a paradox. The person they care about, they keep hurting. So how does that equal care? It's a defective thinking system. It really is. They're in that trance state that they believe this is reality. But the reality really kicks in when the person they say they care about says, I can't take it anymore. And then it hits them for real. A lot of them. Some of them it doesn't. Some of them they don't care. Some of them they want you to hurt. They want their power over you and they want to keep it. But others, they finally realize it. And this is leading to the message that I received. I just wanted to share with you a background that I don't normally talk about. I mean, I've talked about how I was emotionally abusive in the past, but I never really got into kind of the full story there. So I don't know if that helps anyone listening for the first time and they think, well, why would I listen to this guy? He was emotionally abusive. I don't want to listen to somebody who was that. But at the same time, I've heard from people say, I want to hear your perspective because you were the one who did it. Why did you do it? And then a lot of people who were emotionally abusive and have stopped, they usually get the question, if you loved me, why did you hurt me? That is such a valid, legitimate question. And it took me a while to think about why I used to do those behaviors. And the answer I came up with is very, unfortunately, it's a simple one. The simple answer is because I thought I was right. Again, that's no excuse, but I thought I was right. I thought my behavior was the right way to act. Emotionally abusive behaviors come from poor or unhealthy coping mechanisms that typically originated from childhood survival mechanisms because the child did not know how to cope with challenges or how to relate to other people because they weren't taught well, or they had bad role or unhealthy role modeling, toxic role modeling, or they were put in situations they didn't know how to comprehend. They were overwhelmed. And so they came up with ways to deal with it. Part of my healing journey was trying to figure out where my behaviors came from. And when I looked back, when I started healing, when I started working on my emotional triggers and why I was so judgmental and critical and why I did the silent treatment and I wanted my partner to feel bad and guilty, when I did all that work, I learned that my childhood was pretty much full of challenges. Growing up in a dysfunctional, toxic, alcoholic home, my mom's the people pleaser, my stepfather is this, my father wasn't in the picture, and on and on and on. And again, not using those as excuses, it's just, that's what happened. And that's why I started the behaviors I did. And the behaviors I was doing in childhood, they helped me get through the moment. But then I did those same behaviors in adult relationships, and they were very unhealthy. They were toxic. Because what worked in childhood doesn't necessarily work when you're an adult in adult relationships. Being quiet in childhood helped me, or at least made me believe that I wouldn't get hurt. And so being quiet in my relationships when I was older, I believed was the way to manipulate the person I was with to do what I wanted. Just like in childhood, I was being quiet to manipulate my stepfather from not acting aggressively toward me. I'm not saying that's a 1-to-1 ratio. I'm just saying that was part of it. Because that's what happens. We grow up in a dysfunctional or toxic environment, or we have unhealthy role models, and then we develop these behaviors that we can sometimes take into our adult relationships, and then we mess them up. And then we don't know why we're unhappy, or we don't know why we're losing people, or we don't know why we keep attracting the wrong people. It all stems from how we were behaving as a child, or if you had some traumatic event later on in life that changed who you are. And I'm not saying these are the only things that cause us to act dysfunctionally or toxic or change our behaviors, but most of the time it is. the things that happened in childhood or the traumatic events that happened either in childhood or later on in life can certainly change how we show up in relationships. So I'm going to segue right into an email that I received that talks about very much what I'm talking about here. Somebody said that I've been emotionally abused throughout most of my marriage. My husband and I have been going to therapy for over a year, and I've just been wanting him to treat me better so we can get back to being more intimate. It's been almost a decade since we were intimate. He even told me once that he couldn't care less if we never had sex again. To me, that was a deal breaker. I'm not that old, and I want sex in my relationship. A few months back, however, he had a, quote, revelation that he's been treating me poorly and suddenly feels differently. I want to believe he's changed, but it's hard for me to be open to it, and it seems like he's doing all the right things. He now wants to have sex, and he mentions it often, but I'm not in the right headspace to do that. I told him after all these years of not touching or kissing, etc., it's going to take me some time to make it not awkward. He asked me, how long do I have to wait? Because I'm sexually frustrated. He says he's not giving me a timeline. However, he is, in my opinion. How can I open myself up to not being turned off by his comments because this is what I wanted and now this is the only thing that bothers me and I feel rushed? I feel like that's all he wants, and once we do it, will we go back to the same way it was? And I think what she's saying is that if they have sex, then will it just go back to the emotionally abusive relationship again? I think that's what it is. So she goes on, I know I'm assuming, but it's hard not to after all these years. And her question is it possible for me to open up, or do you think our relationship is just too far gone? I would love your thoughts and comment. Thanks for sharing that. Sorry you went through this. That's a long time to go without intimacy in a marriage. And I'm not going to address your question right away because there are a couple things that you said that really stuck out to me, and I want to address those first. You said that he asked, how long do I have to wait because I'm sexually frustrated? This is like one of the most selfish things that someone can ask someone they've been emotionally abusive to for so many years. And I see this a lot in the Healed Being program where the emotionally abusive person, and I just mentioned it myself just a moment ago, because this is how I felt too. The emotionally abusive person finally gets it. They go, oh my God, I've been doing this to you. I feel so bad. I'm back. I'm back to normal. I'm healthy again. So let's connect. Let's have sex. Let's hold hands and let's be a happy, healthy couple with a long-lasting relationship. So you have a decade of abusive behavior that wears the victim of that behavior down year after year. I mean, daily drip feeding of emotionally abusive behaviors. And who knows what they were. She didn't really mention. She just said that he was treating her poorly. And day after day, after month, after week, after year, and then he snaps out of his trance. I'm just going to use that term. He snaps out of it and says, oh my God, I've been mistreating you all this time. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. And almost instantly, he's back to being a healthy person, or he's finally a healthy person. For the first time, maybe in their marriage, I don't know. And he says, I feel so good again, and I'm so sorry what I did to you, and hey, let's have sex. The very first thing that comes to mind for me is it's nice to know that you finally stopped being emotionally abusive, but now the person that you've hurt for years has so much healing to do. And they have to explore if their heart is still in it. They have to explore if they are still in love with you. She has to explore if she is willing to give this relationship a chance, because she has been in survival mode this whole time. And so for you to suddenly say, this other person to say, hey, I'm healed now. I'm so sorry for what I did. Let's have sex. And I know I'm probably condensing everything into a very short window. Hopefully it was a lot longer than that. But this is what it sounds like. Hey, I'm healed now. Let's connect again. This is like, and this is what I use in my Healed Being program. I say, this is like somebody who put another person in jail. And they didn't deserve to be in jail, but they were in jail for years and years. And the jailer, which is the emotional abuser, has their victim, and in this case, we'll talk about it as his spouse, his wife. The victim has been in jail and she didn't deserve it. And she's miserable in there. And she feels like she can't do anything about it. She's in an emotional prison. Then one day he says, "Oh man, I probably shouldn't be keeping you in that jail. I feel really bad. Here, let me unlock it. Hey, now that you're free, let's go to the movies." The person in jail for all that time, unjustly, is not going to want to connect with that person. They need to find themselves again. They need to reconnect with themselves. And this is one thing that I have to convey over and over again to emotionally abusive people who suddenly the light bulb comes on for them and they snap out of their trance. I have to tell them, the person that you've hurt might need a lot of time to heal. Well, they will need a lot of time to heal. Sometimes they can start healing in 2 to 4 months. They can start feeling like themselves in 2 to 4 months because they have to get off the track they were on to get onto another track. All this time they've been on this one track, and most of it has been survival. I don't want to provoke the emotionally abusive person. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I need to walk on eggshells. I don't want to do the wrong thing. I don't want to tick them off. I don't want to do this or say this. And I have to be careful in every single thought that goes through the brain, that goes through the mind of a victim of emotional abuse while they're in a relationship includes how to behave around the other person. So imagine if everything, you don't have to imagine, a lot of people listening know what I'm talking about, but imagine this isn't something that you've experienced before, where every single move you make, everything that you say is scrutinized or criticized or brought up in conversation that you're thinking wrong, or you're too sensitive, or you're too dramatic, or you're not smart enough because you did X, Y, Z. Imagine if every single thought you have includes what you need to do in order not to provoke the emotionally abusive behavior. You would feel completely oppressed. Even after you were released from the emotional prison, your mind is still in that space. You are going to feel oppressed. You are not going to feel safe. You are not going to trust that the changes that you are seeing are real. You need time. And that time, it has to do with you reconnecting and rediscovering who you are. Because you may have lost yourself if it's been long enough. It doesn't even have to be a long time, but you can lose yourself in the emotionally abusive relationship. And if you have lost yourself, you need time to rediscover who you are. That's step 1. Actually, that's like step 2, because step 1 is trying to get your head back on straight, wondering what's going on because they're no longer being hurtful towards you. If they're no longer being hurtful towards you, how are you supposed to act? You've gotten used to acting a certain way because you knew what to expect from them. Oh, they're going to be upset. Oh, they're going to say something about this. I better keep my mouth shut because this, and this. But now it's an entirely different scenario. You don't know how to act. You don't know what to say. You don't know what to do. All you need is time to yourself. That's typically what you need to do. When you come out of the emotionally abusive relationship or the emotional abuse stops, you need time to yourself. You need to figure out who you are again. And you need time to heal. And that healing involves reconnecting with yourself, starting to trust yourself again, getting to know yourself again. What are my likes? What are my dislikes? I don't know, because all I've been doing is trying to accommodate and adapt. I'm trying to make sure that nothing bad happens. And that's been my mindset this whole time. Just trying to make sure nothing bad happens. And then one day you don't need to do that anymore. You need to change your programming. And that takes a long time because you've been programmed, conditioned to act this way, to stay safe. It's like the child in a very dangerous household who doesn't know how to behave, so they develop survival mechanisms. And the victim of an emotionally abusive relationship, or any abusive relationship, has developed survival mechanisms throughout the years that they've been together in order to stay safe. And bring some semblance of sanity and maybe even a sliver of happiness if they can find it. They find ways to survive. And when the threat is no longer there, it doesn't matter. PTSD sets in and you're still trying to figure out what's real. Because when, let's just say the phone rang in the past and somebody said, "Oh, who's that?" And they got really jealous. And now the phone rings again and they don't say that. Oh, what does that mean? You don't know how to deal with it. You don't know what to expect. It's unpredictable. And this is why you need time when the emotional abuse stops. You need time to figure this stuff out and to see over and over and over again. It might take you months or maybe longer. It might take you over a year. And I do have a general timeline I'll talk about in a moment. But, let's just say that they used to be a very jealous person and then suddenly the phone rings and they don't say anything and they don't care. What do you do with that? They've never done that. How do you deal with it? You have to figure out a whole new set of routines and processes, and you don't know how to be yourself around them. You don't know what it's like when you're not being hurt or you're not being belittled or criticized or intimidated. You don't know what it's like. So now you have to figure out who you are when that's not in your life. That's why it takes time. The timelines I typically use are in the first 2 to 4 months after the emotional abuse stops, the fog starts to lift. And that fog is the constant thinking about what the other person is going to say or do. And once they are not doing or saying the things that used to hurt or oppress you or control you, then that fog starts to lift and you realize, oh, maybe things are changing. But that takes 2 to 4 months minimum. It could happen sooner. These aren't exact, but that's what I've seen. So in 2 to 4 months, you start feeling like, oh, okay, I guess it's safe to at least be myself a little bit more. And you're going to put your toe in the water and figure out, well, if I do this, is it going to tick them off? If I do that, is it going to make them upset? And you test these things. This is what happens too, is that you'll start testing these things, the stuff that used to trigger them. And when they aren't triggered, you are going to, check that box in your mind saying, wow, they weren't triggered when I did that or said that. That's an improvement. But I still don't trust. I still don't feel safe because I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm always waiting for it because that's how I've been conditioned all these years, is that things will be going fine and then suddenly, boom, there's the brick being thrown at me. That's what my wife said. She said, when I was married to that guy, every time he was nice to me, that always meant he was about to throw a brick at me. So she learned that's what happens when her husband's being nice to her. So imagine the emotional abuse stops in your relationship and they're suddenly nice. If that's your experience of them being nice, is that they suddenly throw a proverbial brick at you, later on they do something or say something that hurts you or makes you feel bad or whatever, then that's going to be your experience when the emotional abuse really does stop. The boy who cried wolf. The wolf never comes and the wolf never comes. And so if the wolf really does come, the boy who cried wolf says, wolf, wolf, no one's going to believe him. So the emotionally abusive person who was kind and then hurtful, then kind and then hurtful, they stop the abusive behavior and now they're being kind and hopefully it's permanent. But now you're going to learn how to deal with that, like I was saying, because you're used to the kindness turning into harmful behavior that hurts you. And so that's what takes time to figure out. 2 to 4 months, the fog starts to lift. And then after that, between the rest of the time, 4 months and 12 months, is slow progress of healing. It can take up to 12 months or longer to heal from an abusive relationship. And some people don't heal fully. I mean, there are people that have had it really bad and were affected so hard that they need therapy. They need more than just what they're going through, reconnecting with themselves, because they have been brought down to such a low level, low self-esteem, low self-worth, where they felt like nothing and they can't connect with themselves. They have to rebuild themselves from scratch. So there are those who have been through it so bad, heavy cases of narcissistic abuse and other abusive behaviors, physical abuse. Some people are just beaten down and become fully submissive and don't have a clue who they are anymore because they completely lost themselves. So some people do need to speak to a therapist to heal. And some people, once the emotional abuse stops, they are able to do that on their own. They're able to get through it and figure things out and talk to friends, and they start getting their life back, or they start rebuilding their life and figuring out who they are again, or rebuilding who they are. They're rebuilding the identity that was taken away, because all this time your identity was really wrapped in the abusive behaviors of another person and enmeshed pretty much. Everything you thought was enmeshed with what are they going to do or say next. And so stepping out of that does take time. It does take time to heal. And what I've seen is after the fog lifts, after you realize, oh, they do seem to be changing. They do seem to be different. And that can take 2 to 4 months. It can take, less than that or more than that. But after that period, then if there's still love in the person's heart for the person who hurt them, so if the recipient of the abusive behavior still feels love, that in-love feeling for the perpetrator of that abusive behavior, and they want to work on the relationship because they do see potential of this relationship working, because that person really does seem to have changed, then you will start to see very, very slow progress, but progress in general over the next several months. That progress could be you look in each other's eyes a little longer. You touch the hand, you touch the shoulder, you sit together next to the couch and things feel good. You have a date and it goes well. The phone rings where they used to get jealous and they don't anymore, and that goes well. And it reinforces how you feel, and it reinforces that you can feel good in a relationship again, and you are literally seeing a different person in front of you. And when that happens, you just need constant reinforcement that the behaviors that they used to do are no longer present, and that they really are a different person, because that's what they look like. They look like a different person. You will look at them and say, I don't know who you are. Then that could be a good thing. If you don't know who they are and they're acting kind and respectful and nice and they've been doing it for months, then that's a good thing. That's a good sign of progress. And that progress has to continue while you build trust again and you feel safer again. And that takes time. And that time can go on for the next 7, 12, whatever months. But that's typically the timelines I see. And so for the person who wrote, I mentioned, he said, how long do I have to wait? Because I'm sexually frustrated. And I didn't address that yet, but I'm addressing it now because I wanted to talk about how long it takes for the victim of abusive behavior to heal, and how I often see how the emotional abuser who has changed and is changing and healing might think that it's okay to reconnect now, as if the person they hurt has no trauma or has no PTSD from what they've experienced all this time. And that's just not the case. Let alone how selfish it is to say, hey, I'm healed and I'm sexually frustrated, so let's have sex, which is a very selfish thing to pursue when he has oppressed you and frustrated you for so long. And I'm not talking about sexually, I'm talking about what he has taken away from you. And instead of focusing on what he wants and what he needs right now, his focus needs to be, what can I do to make sure that I never show up this way ever again? That's the first part of this. The second part of this is, what can I do to make sure the person that I have hurt all this time feels supported and feels like they're getting their power back? Do I request something from that person, or do I give them whatever they need? Because that's what I teach. I teach that once the emotionally abusive person has stopped doing the behaviors and is actually healing, has stopped the emotional triggers or is working on their emotional triggers, and is actually healing, they don't request things from the person they've hurt. They don't put expectations on the person they hurt. What they do is leave the person they hurt alone and let that person find their way back to them. And if you, the person who wrote, if you do not feel like he's letting you find your way back to him, you will feel like you're in the very same situation where he wants to control what you should be doing, and he wants you to feel bad for not doing what you should be doing, according to him. And if all he can think about is his own sexual frustration, then what he's doing is not allowing you to heal on your own time and find your way back to him in your own way on your own time. You need to find your way back to him on your own time, which means maybe one day you'll give him a kiss and it'll be the greatest day of, the last how many years, because you will feel safe and warm and trusting toward him. But that can't come if he is mentioning what he wants from you and what he needs from you, even if it's good intentions, even if he's being, quote, kind about it or not pushy or anything like that. Just mentioning it is saying to you, hey, focus on me and my needs. When he's not supposed to be doing that at all, he needs to focus on himself and his own needs. If he's sexually frustrated, then he should go take care of that in the bathroom or something. I'm too much information, but that's what happens, is that the person who is healing from being the emotional abuser needs to take care of themselves until the other person finds their way back, because they need to find their way back in their own time if they are even coming back, because that has to roll around in your head for a while. The very last question this person asked is it possible for me to open up, or do you think our relationship is just too far gone? And my answer to that is, don't worry about opening up. Don't worry about how far the relationship is. Just ask yourself, if this is real, if he truly is healed and he's never going to show up as abusive anymore, and I had an opportunity to be with him again in a loving, caring, safe, trusting relationship, would I pursue that? And the real question is, am I still in love with him? And that's where you need to be honest with yourself. And that's where you need to go first. If you are feeling any pressure from him, then that's too much. Any is too much. It needs to be none. When the abuse stops, the healing begins. And the healing can only begin on your own time. And it's for both people. In my program, I say the abusive person needs to focus on themselves, and the victim of that abuse needs to focus on themselves. And the victim of that abuse, if there is a chance, if there is still love in their heart and they want to work on the relationship, needs to find their way back to the person who hurt them. And they are basically driving the bus. They are holding the reins. And the timeline of healing for a relationship that has a chance of reconciliation is up to the victim who went through it all. And so to the person who wrote, is it possible for me to open up, or do you think the relationship is just too far gone? It really depends if you still have in love feelings. Because, all my exes, they loved me. Even at the end, they still loved me, but they weren't in love anymore. And that in love feeling needs to be there in order for reconciliation to take place. And if it's not there, it's not there. If you can't find it, if you can't connect with it, then you may not be able to. And that's when you know that the relationship won't work. And some people can try to make it work. And sometimes you can see the new healed person right in front of you, and they're definitely not doing the behaviors anymore, but you just can't connect emotionally and you can't put your heart into it. If that happens, there's nothing you can do about it. You can try to work things out, but it still has to be on your timeline. So let me conclude the show by telling this person who wrote what maybe you can say to him if and when this topic comes up again. And that might be something like, when you put pressure or expectation on me, it pushes me away. I need to heal on my own time, and I need to come back to you on my own time. And that's it. You may not want to say that, but that is exactly what's happening. And he needs to know that your timeline is priority and your needs and your wants are priority. And the fact that he's asking for anything instead of looking at you and saying, however long you need to heal and feel connected to me again, I support whatever it takes for you. That's what I want. I want you to feel comfortable in your own skin. I want you to feel safe around me. I want you to start trusting me again. But I know that it's going to take you time to get there. And I'm not here to put pressure on you or put expectations on you. I don't want that at all, because that's what I've been doing the entire time we've been together. And I never want to do that again. I accept where you need to be. Even if it takes months, I don't care. Even if it takes a year, I don't care. I just want you to feel good inside yourself. I want you to be happy, and I want you to feel safe. And if you need time to do that, I support that, because I care about you. I love you. That's what he should be saying, because his needs, his wants don't really matter right now. They matter to him, and he can work on those things in himself for himself, but he should not be getting them from you, because the pendulum has been on one side the entire time, the entire marriage, and now it needs to come back to the other side. And you can stop it where you are and hold on to it for a while. You hold the reins. You have the power. This is how you regain your power, is healing on your time in your own way. And when you're ready, you will come back or not. But it's up to you. And you should have no one, especially the person who has done all these things to you over the years, asking for anything or putting expectations on you, because you've had enough of that for far too long. I hope this helps. Stay strong. Thanks for listening, and share this with others who might benefit. Love and Abuse is the official podcast of the Mean Workbook, an assessment and healing guide for difficult relationships. The workbook contains a 200-point assessment to tell you exactly what's causing you to leave so many interactions feeling bad. Gain clarity on your relationship today. Visit loveandabuse.com for more information. If you've discovered that you are doing the hurtful behaviors to someone that you care about and you want to change that about yourself, sign up for the only program that walks you through the entire process of healing from being emotionally abusive. It has changed thousands of lives and relationships and can change yours too. Visit healedbeing.com to start with some free lessons right away. And if you're looking for a safer way to listen to this show where all the titles to the episodes are changed, click on the Safe Listening button on the podcast page over at loveandabuse.com. The show exists to remind you that you're not alone and you're not going crazy. You are worthy of respect, kindness, and love, and you deserve to be accepted exactly as you are. Again, stay strong. We'll talk again soon.